Fishing for Jesus, fishing for Jesus. I'm on a mission, doing the Great Commission. Fishing for Jesus.
What if I told you Jesus was teaching out of the book of Proverbs when he was teaching on humility and honor in Luke chapter 14? So let me read for you Luke chapter 14 from verse 7 to verse 11. But there's one portion that I'll specifically pull out of the scripture. So it says, "Now he told a parable to those who were invited. When he noticed how they chose the place of honor, saying to them, 'When you are invited by someone to a wedding or to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, Give your place to this person, and then he will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when the host comes, he may say to you, Friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of everyone at the table. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted.'" Now the portion that I want to take out of the scripture is verse 9. So he says, "And he who invited you both will come and say to you, Give your place to this person, and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place." And then he says in verse 10, "But when you are invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, Friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted." When I read that scripture, think to yourself, which chapter and verse in Proverbs does this actually remind you of? And then you'll see that Jesus taught directly from that chapter and from that verse. So today, my task is to delve a bit deeper and hopefully show you that Jesus didn't come to teach a new lesson, but instead he took a wisdom principle and brought it to life. In biblical times, where you sat at a feast wasn't just about having a good view. It was a statement of status and honor. The most important guest would sit closest to the host, and the others would then receive a place lower. And it's no different for us today. If you think of a wedding, there's always a main table where the groom and the bride would sit, and the parents would sit with them. The first few tables will be reserved for close family, siblings, and then you'll have another table close to the main table, which would be for the bridal party. These are considered places of honor. But what if someone tries to seat themselves at the main table? That would be awkward, wouldn't it? And it would even be embarrassing. This is exactly the kind of situation that Jesus is speaking about in Luke chapter 14. If someone were to seat themselves at the main table without being invited, that's the situation where Jesus is saying, don't take the place of honor. Don't come into the feast and take the place of honor. And then when someone comes, so let's say this person comes and they sits at the main table without being invited. They're sitting on the seat of, let's say, the parent, one of the parents. And when one of the parents will come, then that person will then be told to remove themselves from that seat and go sit on the other place. And that's the picture that Jesus is painting here. But what scripture in Proverbs is this really from? Where did Jesus take this from? Out of the Old Testament. And like I said, Jesus didn't teach a new lesson, but he merely took an old wisdom principle, a kingdom principle in fact. He took an old wisdom principle and then brought it to life, expanded on it, and gave a deeper understanding of what it really means. And then Jesus goes on to say, whoever humbles himself will be exalted, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. I'm sure you can think of a situation where in your life, where you either humbled yourself, and through that humility, you were lifted up, you were promoted, you were exalted. And then there could even have been a situation in your life where you thought of yourself higher than what you ought to have thought, and you exalted yourself to a position that was not your position, and you were humbled. We see this in today's life a lot with in relation to work, to the work environment, where a person that is just a normal worker with you would assume a position higher than you and try and tell you what you need to do and what you must do at work. So that's them assuming a place of honor. But if the person for which that place is reserved comes, they will be embarrassed if that person corrects them in front of everyone. So in the same way, Jesus is telling us, humble yourselves and you will be exalted. But the question remains, where in the book of Proverbs did Jesus take this kingdom principle and this wisdom, this nugget of wisdom from? So now we look at Proverbs 25, verse 6 and 7. Do not exalt yourself in the king's presence, and do not claim a place among his great men. It is better for him to say to you, come up here, than for him to humiliate you in the presence of his nobles, whom you have seen previously. In biblical times, where you are seated at feast is not just about having a clear or good view, but it's more a statement of status and of honor. So the guest that is honored by the host will have a seating closest to the host, and then the guest that has a lesser status will sit a bit further from the host. And in the same way, as we said, today our setting with weddings is similar. We will have a main table, we will have the honored guest would sit at the main table, which would be the parents of the bride and the groom, and then we'll have the closest tables will be closest family, and also the bridal party, which is places of honor. So in the same way as Proverbs is speaking about, Jesus is also mentioning in Luke chapter 14, and Jesus actually brings the understanding that we might know it's not just about the sitting with the king, but Jesus is actually explaining to us what the proverb really means. It's really that you shouldn't honor or shouldn't exalt yourself in the presence of people, because in doing that, you're at risk of being humbled or humiliated. However, instead, humble yourself in the presence of the people, and then in time, when they tell you to come up here, you'll be exalted in the presence of many. So in the same way, Jesus takes this principle and makes us understand that do not assume the place of honor, but instead wait for your time. For God in himself will lift you up. Do not assume the place of honor, whether it be in society, in social media. Do not exalt yourself or promote yourself in that sense, and humble yourself, and do not assume certain positions before it's time. Humble yourself and wait for God's timing.
Fishing for Jesus, fishing for Jesus. I'm on a mission, doing the Great Commission. Fishing for Jesus, fishing for Jesus. I'm on a mission, doing the Great Commission. Fishing for Jesus, fishing for Jesus.